I'm here with Adam Poots at the 2018 Gencon. His booth is actually way bigger this year, which is why we have this nice space. So, hey Adam.
How are you, Justin?
Good.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm doing really good. So, let's get started on just the creation of King of Death and going into the lore and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, take it away.
That's not a question.
It is because I like...
Let's get started on the creation.
Yes, because so when people come into this, it's a box game with all the content, but it didn't start that way. It started with what? A single miniature, right?
Are you talking how did it start?
Yeah.
That's the question?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it started with me wanting to make a board game, which seems like a pretty simple thing, like how hard could it be? See, right? Just a few figures, no big deal. And then it led to, it turns out finding sculptors, at least back then, was very, very hard. And it was a lot of virtual knocking on doors and a lot of asking for it to be put into people's waiting lists and be very polite. This is like trying to break through to find people who may want to work with this human that they've never seen or heard about before, ever. Luckily, we bumped into Yasmin, who was our artist who did the original Twilight Knight and the White Speaker and the Forsaker and the Savior and the initial Preacher. And those are all like really awesome, strong pieces of artwork. And so if any of you out there want to make a game, like definitely start with artwork before you try to enchant a sculptor to work with you.
Right, because then they have something to base their work off of.
Right. Also, it helps legitimize what you're doing because sculpting is a very intimate, long-winded process if you want something nice. So you want to get the artist excited about what they're going to be working on. So that was the beginning. It was just me trying to chase down sculptors and artists as I kind of mused on what the game could be. Fast forward a little bit. I really wanted to make a hero-based dungeon crawl style game because I fucking love dungeon crawls. And I thought it would be so cool if when you fight the boss, there's like a really big model, but it costs so much to have even just sculpted, let alone like manufactured. What the hell is that going to be like? Maybe I should make a game that focuses on just fighting one big monster at a time. And that way, I could sort of try to make a small game that's just that one monster. And if it does well, we do another one that's just a monster. And, once we have a couple, then I'll have enough of these boss monsters for these heroes to fight. Fast forward a little bit, Who Many or Not has Zombicide, and it's the first sort of runaway hit on Kickstarter. And it's the first time we saw stretch goals and all this crazy stuff happen. It was like mind-blowing. And at that point I'm not sure how big the Kingdom Death range was, maybe like 9 figures big at that point, just resin releases, direct to fans. And the fans came to me and they're like, we want to see your game now. Like, look what Zombicide did, you should do this too. It's like, oh, okay, all right. So, I guess I'm going to roll with this monster thing that makes the most sense right now. It's going to be, I think, ambition-wise, it seems smaller for sure. So let's do that. And then prepared, launched the Kickstarter. And that, first Kickstarter did pretty well. Kind of took off a little bit. So, like, towards the end of it, I was just like, I guess I'm just going to throw all the ideas we have into this. And here comes the Gorm and this, and it was crazy. And then if you guys are fans, then a lot of you have lived through what the first Kickstarter was like. And we had a lot of delays. And I wanted to make sure that everything was to the point where if I looked at it anymore, I would just throw up. I did not, it had to be as good as we could possibly make it, because we're at the point where if we didn't sell the remaining inventory, the last 4,000 games, after we gave the 6,000 out to the backers, we would be in the red, like, forever.
So is that why, because I got into it Black Friday in like 2014, is that why I got such a great deal on the core game and all the expansions? Mm-hmm. So you were just trying to get rid of inventory?
No. I was, at that point, still not 100% sure what the final cost of everything was going to be.
Right, so you want to make sure everything was covered?
I didn't know what the final cost of everything was going to be, including how much all the logistics was going to actually cost us, until that actually all happened.
Oh,
so once we were finally thinking about, okay, what's the price point for this final game? It was supposed to be 100, right? I was like, well, if we wanna come out of this and be able to continue the business, it's got to be this. And a few people in the office were like, "There's no way that's ridiculous. You just figure out how to break even. No way."
Right, because it never a game that big, it never happened before.
Right. And one person in the office at the time, this guy Jesse, was like, $400. I was like, "You gotta be kidding me." He's like, "I'm not kidding you. Like, I just went and spent $400 on 40K figures yesterday. Like, $400. Look at this. Look at this. Are you kidding me? How much you see this Phoenix for if you saw it in the store? How much you buy it for?" I'm like, "I don't know, probably like $120." He's like, "Yeah. Look, come on." I was like, "All right, Jesse, let's do it. $400." And it took off, and we sold out. And then after we sold out, we're at the point where we were thinking, do we use the money we just made to do another production run, or do we head back to Kickstarter for another production run? Because the demand's still here. People like this game we made. This is amazing. Holy crap. And, you know, after a lot of deliberation, I drove everyone in the office nuts going over the value of both sides of it. I decided ultimately that, well, we started on Kickstarter. We got to go back to Kickstarter. So, you know, and I wanted to go in with a plan, you know, where we could quote unquote win, so to speak. I was like, I'm not going to get back on Kickstarter and just kind of put this out there and be like, okay, well, we're doing a reprint and that's it. I was like, I have to be prepared if this thing takes off.
And it did.
It took off. I still wasn't prepared.
I know, because you had your plan for how many updates you were going to do, and I believe you released the final one you had planned, the Goldsmoke Night, right away.
Yeah, so all this careful planning, all this effort, and within, I think, the first couple hours, the campaign had doubled what it did originally, while I was shooting for about, I think, 4 to 5 million, and it was already there within a few hours, like the very first day, and it's like, all right, I need to sit down for a little bit and just sort of figure out. This is a very surreal, like all plans are now off the rails. I have to start making new plans. And yeah, it's just kind of a very strange period of my life where I just woke up every day, was 100% on the whole day long, got through it, went to sleep, not even that late, woke up the next day, did the same thing. And just like Gambler's Chest, expansion, and like as all the pieces were coming down, it started to make sense. I'm like, I'm gonna do this here, I'm gonna do this there. And it got to sort of like open the vault of all the things that we've kind of been working on in the background, put them out into the light, introduce them to everybody, and start to plan on like making it. And sort of like talking with my partner, and we're like, should we cut this off? You know, should we limit the number of backers and just be like, all right, guys, we have enough stuff, we're done? Or do we go for it and just be like, I guess this is our job for the next 3 to 5 years? We're like, let's go for it. Let's do it. So that campaign ended, and here we are. Is it 2 years later? We fulfilled Wave 1, which is the update, which it seems like a pretty solid pattern with us. We worked on more than I expected to get it as nice as possible. We got Wave 2 out, which is just a reprint of the expansions, and we're working on Wave 3 and Wave 4 right now.
Nice. With the sheer amount of miniatures in the campaign, how many were actually just planned with the art done, all of them? And then you just figured out production later with all the waves? Or was it all concrete before you even hit go on the Kickstarter?
I have a very good relationship with my manufacturing partner. So before we ran the Kickstarter, I gave him a general idea of the plan and let him know kind of like a range of what we're expecting. So we worked out on a loose plan and a budget before we even went into it. So that was good to have. It's really like some of the miniatures were already done, some of them weren't. It was kind of like a little bit all over the place because I do the thing which drives my team absolutely nuts, where it seems like I feel like I do a lot of my best work sort of thinking on my feet, like in the heat of the moment when it's like organic, almost like a holistic approach to it. It's like, it would make a lot of sense if we did it this way or we added this. So through the course of the campaign, a lot of things were added that were never planned, never thought of before. Just like, yeah, sure. Like the Screaming God, for example, was already sculpted by the time we hit the campaign. And then the Honeycomb Weaver was a piece of artwork that I really, really liked with an artist. I wasn't quite sure how to use it or what to do with it. And it wasn't even until I was like writing the update for it that it clicked. I'm like, I know what we could do. with this expansion that might be interesting. And then, there it is. Now it's something we are going to work on and develop and make the same standard that we make everything that we work on.
Right, and that takes a long time, getting the concepts flushed out,
Yes.
talking to all the sculptors and the artists. And then you have a lot of sculptors here.
Yeah.
And in fact, the sculptor who sculpted the Gambler.
Yep, Jack Alexander.
Yeah, we've seen him work on that
Phoenix.
for quite a while.
Yes, that took better part of a year. He was working on that and also renovating his home in France.
Oh, nice.
But it's insane. It's 276 individual people. Like, that's
Wow.
not digitally done. So every single one of those humans on it sculpted by hand and is slightly different than their neighbor. It's crazy.
From a production standpoint on a miniature, because you were talking at the beginning that you had to go with smaller monsters simply because the production cost was too much. When you get to a bigger monster like the Gambler, where it's all one solid piece, how do you design something big like that for production?
And the Gambler's not that big.
Well, in
compared
terms of
to,
like if you did it in solid resin, it'd be crazy.
I mean, you can't do mass production solid resin. You
Right.
just can't.
No,
It's gotta be plastic.
the model.
Yeah, so then it all turns down to the engineering side of things.
Right.
And I'm for the Gambler in specific, I'm going to try to talk to the factory about doing 1 or 2 sliding core tools. Because, all the fans have graced us with a very large budget to work with this time.
Right.
It was a very large budget the first time, too.
Well, it helps because then you can use that to get it done the way you want it to get done.
Yes, make it a little bit better for people. I'm hoping, my plan, I don't want to give everyone a Gambler that's like 2 sheets of like basically countries that they have to put together.
Right.
But
the scribe comes to mind.
yeah, the scribe. Oh my god.
Yeah, I put one together, and it's all you got to figure out all the different, what is it, letters or numbers?
Yeah.
And then
The resin scribe.
Yep, the resin
Yeah.
scribe, and then you have to. It's like a puzzle you got to put together and
Yep.
then take apart and then glue as you put it together again.
Yeah, there's definitely a very specific build order on that one. Or you're in
Yeah,
trouble.
I mean, it's undeniable how good they look.
Yes.
So I mean, you got that right away.
Yeah.
But then you got to think, how easy is it for people once they get it in their hands to build it?
Yeah. Some of our models are tricky, that's for sure. Trying to find that sweet spot between, if it's tricky, you better make it worth it.
Right.
If it's tricky and you're like, well, really? Then not good.
No, but if it's tricky and then when you put it together, it's like an accomplishment, and you have this beautiful piece of art.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's worth it.
That's
for sure.
that's what's appealing to the game so much, is you merge that the lore that people have to experience rather than just read about,
Yeah.
combined with the beautiful artwork and the miniatures and of course
like,
the gameplay.
Building the model, like you notice the details and you start to like just pick up little bits about it. And then when you start to see its hit locations and its AI deck, like slowly the image of what this is and how it lives, like it starts to develop, and it adds to the like emergent narrative as you play. It's like, to me, I always thought you gotta build the models. It just brings you closer to the game, and it took me years to understand like why it brings you closer to the game and to appreciate that more than just because I prefer it.
Right.
When you have a model and you're like, this looks great, it's okay, it's done. As opposed to like, oh, I have to find what piece now? That's like the hobby side of it. And I'm like blown away and amazed by how many board gamers this has attracted. More board gamers than miniature gamers.
Yeah.
And they get into the hobby from the game, which is super cool.
Yeah, there's a big difference. We're talking about Zombicide as the Kickstarter that gave you the idea. There's a big difference between miniatures that are already done in a board game and then you just play the game. The gameplay mechanics could be great, but you don't get that aspect of creation.
No, you don't get to know them the same way. You really don't.
Yep, and you see that a lot in the AI decks and the encounters because it's very Monster Hunter, and you encounter this new thing you've never seen before. How do I kill it?
Yeah.
And you won't know that until you start seeing what it does and how you can react to everything that it does to try to kill you. I remember Twist Gaming, one of the first ones I caught, one of the first broadcasts, one of their survivors lost an arm after the first fight, and so they went back to the settlement to try to save them, but they ended up just cutting their other arm off. So, and then the rule is you can fight with your teeth and your feet. So
Sure can.
Yep. So for people getting into it from the creation standpoint, painters, artists, sculptors, if there's anybody, I don't know how full your team is for that. If there's anybody who wants to show you their profile and get into that, what do you have to tell them?
Email me.
Just email you?
Yeah, right now, I try to tell people who are interested in working with us that we're so just overloaded.
Right.
That it's hard to like train someone up to sort of like work within the team and work in the right tone. That's the hardest part, because there'll be so many talented new or amateur artists who approach me, and it's like, I'd love to work with these people right now, but I just don't have, they don't know what we need or want yet, and I don't have the time to do the back and forth to like bring them up to speed on that.
Gotcha.
It's almost easier, even though there's fewer of us, to just like get through it with the people that I know.
Yeah, right, because you've been working with them for a long time, and they know the mood that you're going for and know what you have to deal with when you actually have to make them and talk to. So there's a lot of that.
Sculpting is even more difficult than just the 2D artwork, because we have to think about all the technical aspects and the engineering aspects to it too. You'll see there's so many talented sculptors work in ZBrush usually, and they'll make things that look amazing when you're looking at them on the screen, but they're not really taking into consideration how it's going to look when it's this big. Because like your perspective changes and the proportions change. The biggest, most easy thing is that the details are just not either deep or protruding enough. So, someone may have a tie, and when it's a model this big, it's just gone. Mm-hmm. And that can take a while. For artists especially, it's not like you can hand them a spec sheet. Be like, everything has to be exactly like this. I've tried.
Right, yeah, it's not engineering.
They have to like learn it over time. And that's a lot of back and forth.
And with the physical art, you're saying the 2D is a lot easier?
2D is a little bit easier, right? Because it's about atmosphere and mood and staying on brand. But it's still hard though, because when it's something that's lore specific, like the story events, like someone might be like, oh, this looks great, I'm going to put a campfire here. You can't put a campfire there. What are you doing? The survivors don't know about fire. They have these bioluminescent lanterns, so they just never really got used to fire. So like no one knows that off the top of their head. So we tried making like a starter kit for new artists that's just filled with all the existing artwork, but it's hard to give someone like intimate knowledge about the game world and the lore without working with them for a long period of time.
Right, because then you'll have something, like you were saying, something in a scene that doesn't belong in the scene.
Right, you just can't do.
Right. So the artwork is gorgeous.
Thank you.
You said last year that it was just expensive to produce.
Of course.
Any chance that you're going to produce it potentially for collectors?
Oh, you mean like more
the actual prints, yeah.
The prints were fun. People really enjoyed it. We talked about sort of rotating that into sort of like our monthly sales a bit more. I think with everything that was going on, it's just sort of forgot, but I'd like to.
Yeah, it's
nice.
You were saying it was just really expensive
it is
per
expensive.
print.
To do it nice, it's expensive.
Right, but would it be worth it just to increase the price a little bit to help? Because I would assume that a limited run of that.
It wasn't so much a money-making thing,
right,
but more just a logistics thing of, okay, if we're having a sale with these figures, we can use boxes this size.
Right.
The pack team can handle it. We try never to have a sale with more than 9 or 10 items, because then it just gets confusing and our rate of errors go up. Because our office is tiny. We're in New York. Our pack station is like a 20-foot by 16-foot area at the front of the office where everybody else works. That's it. We are working on expanding, but that's a different note. So if we did prints, then we were doing prints instead of something else, which is fine. We just honestly forgot about it.
Right, it didn't even occur to me that the prints, because I ship a lot of things too, and it didn't even occur to me that having the prints a different size format would it directly increase the amount of boxes you'd have to buy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then that would be weird having to pack those properly to keep the weight down for the shipping costs.
Someone gets a print in a miniature, that seems like a good deal, but the print would need to go in a big box. It needs to be made sure so it's super flat, and then the model would need to go in, probably with an inordinate amount of tissue paper to make sure it doesn't shift around.
Right.
Which is all fine and good, but it's just like, when we get to the month, we're like, all right, what are we going to release next month? Let's plan this out. We haven't put any prints back in, but I think we will.
Awesome. So you were talking last year. I saw the booths, the nice cornices, the 3D printed, beautiful art pieces. You said they were too prohibitively expensive to produce because of the size.
Yeah. Unless we made them in like what a houseware stuff usually made in, plaster or porcelain.
Right.
Yeah. We haven't looked into any of that yet. We're too focused on getting through all the stuff we promised for.
This is all just extra stuff that we like as fans.
I would love to do it, but it's just not on the front of the stove, so to speak.
Right.
It's like back burner wish list stuff.
Exactly.
I would love to get a set of lanterns from the game world made that we can then bring to the show. Right now the lanterns we use, I don't know where my partner found them. Her internet skills are amazing because they look great. But they're just like from a wholesale company.
Right.
And they have little tea lights in them. And it looks great when you see them in the show, but we know that they're not on brand.
And making something like that that's very Kingdom Death stylized, that's a separate kind of production that's just going to be another thing to add on to.
Yes. Which is fine, but you need to kind of balance those things in between everything else. Otherwise, overwhelmed happens very quick.
Yeah, because you only have so much time in the day and your team is really small. You almost have to hire, for all the little things, almost have to hire a separate team to do that. But then that...
And we have to train them so
exactly.
they do it right. Yeah.
And then that's just more time. So I totally get it. I appreciate that aspect.
One of the things that is in the queue are, I really do want to try doing busts, but our resin manufacturer, if we sent him busts, then our actual like regular resin unit production count would go down. So I'm looking for a partner domestically that I can work with to just focus on the busts. I have one lined up. I think hopefully we'll do a sample run probably this year, just to see how it goes.
Would you ever do the larger format 54 millimeter figures again?
We have a couple of them, but those are still part of like our regular
production
queue. So it's just like, do we do an old 54 millimeter resin model, or do we do 2 new models? It's just like a hard line limit on what can be made every month.
That's true, because your production facility for the resins is in France.
Yep.
And they have other clients as well, I assume.
Not really.
Not really?
No, not really. He said basically, when you don't want to make resin miniatures anymore, I'm retiring. Like, okay.
Nice.
All right, cool. But that's why I started to explore the photo resin stuff. So I was like, all right, well, we don't have room in New York right now because we're still working on expanding, so I couldn't even dream of opening a resin thing in-house. But the 3D printers take up a lot less room, so maybe there's an avenue there to work through if we can find a way to make it so that we can get models to produce from there. And so far we've released 2 models in photo resin. Well, 3 technically, because the Intimacy couples 2. And it's been going all right. It's an exciting place to explore. We're still learning it.
Yeah, I've seen
it definitely won't replace resin production, but it might help us help us release things that normally we couldn't because we're just waiting behind the queue in resin production and behind the queue on plastic production.
Right, because you can do these in-house, and when you run out, you don't have to store them, you can just make more.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Instead of like making an order with our partner, so are awesome, and then waiting and waiting for them to show up.
Right, because you design these things and then you have to give them the things to produce.
Yeah, typically resin, unless I say, oh my god, this one's in a rush, it's about 6 months from when we order a figure to when it arrives and we have enough units to sell. And plastic side of it can be even longer, especially because right now all of our production slots are focused on stuff for the Kickstarter and new content, trying to get the rest of the way through the Gambler's Chest and then get as many of the large monsters finished this side of the year as possible. So it doesn't really leave a lot of room for new things. Getting the Echoes of Death squeezed through was like a real big favor. I was like, guys, please, please, please. They're like, we're gonna have to knock someone else off. I'm like, just, how can we arrange this? They hooked me up. We're good partners.
That's awesome. And how long did it take you to find a good production partner in China?
It's the same plastic guy that has done everything for us.
That's awesome.
In the beginning, as someone who's never done manufacturing overseas before, it was absolutely nerve-wracking. And it took me a long time to learn how to sort of there's a cultural difference between the way a North American does business and the way a company based in Hong Kong does business with a facility in China. And I had to really appreciate and learn the difference in the approach to business to begin to understand it so that I could get a handle on how it actually flows, because it's everyone in this hall struggles with manufacturing. It's just how it goes. You speak to your project manager over there and you're like, how long is this going to be? How long? And they're like, I don't know, I think maybe another month, right? So you're like, okay, another month. And you rush to your fans and you're like, manufacturer said it's going to be another month, right? But culturally speaking, saying it's another month is polite, and it would be rude to tell you how long it may actually take. It's just not the same.
Right.
And it takes a while to learn that. and to sort of appreciate and understand like their point of view on the process and why you end up with things like rolling delays and why things do take as long as they do. And once I got to that point and I found comfortability in it, the relationship all of a sudden just got much better. And I think sort of like when two partners are comfortable and we know we're working towards the same end goal, suddenly things did start to become faster and more easy. So it was nice. It was a nice big turnaround from the first time when I was just sweating bullets. It's like you guys said this would be done November. It's November the next year and we're only like 20% through it. What's going on?
Right, there's that mutual understanding so that you know where they're coming from, they know where you're coming from, and you meet in the middle and it works out.
Yeah.
You are getting way better. I remember the first molds you were figuring out. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of empty space, and you're getting way better, and they are too, working with you. So
there's
it's nice.
a really poor example of kind of what it's like is in Brooklyn or in Manhattan, Chinatown. There's this bootleg anime tape place that we used to go to get anime, and it was like down an escalator in this strange like subterranean mall, and like it's completely unassuming, doesn't look like there's anything in there at all, and you go and you ask for something and the answer would either be here it is or come back next Wednesday. That's it. Never a definitive yes I'll have it then or something is in process, just like come back next Wednesday. Come back. You could be coming back next Wednesday for a year before it shows up. But it will.
Right.
That's the difference.
Speaking of anime, you were wearing a JoJo's Bizarre Adventures shirt last year.
Huge fan.
I know. Are you going to work in kind of that style for some of the male pinups?
I'm trying to. Male pinups, like, it's the art world of male pinups is just not as developed as female pinups. As you have, it's just, I think something sort of strange happened within the sort of game art industry where we had so many years of so many male characters in all different shapes and forms, and female characters only being depicted in just a few ways, right? Mm-hmm. And once we got to the point where it wasn't just major publishers, both in the board game and video game side, working on things, we got to independents. A lot of the independents wanted to see more female characters of a bigger variety. So all of the artists suddenly started getting commissioned for more female characters, and a lot of the artists wanted to work on female characters anyway. So now it's the opposite, where I struggle to find an artist that can do really cool male characters, and everyone just wants to work on different girls all the time. Doesn't matter what type. It's like, do you have any female character concepts for me to work on? I'm like, no, we have a lot. Can you do a male character like this? I don't know, it's not really my thing. Like,
Right, and a lot of people from that line of work, when they were doing male figures, it's all stylized to either a particular character that they already envisioned, or very one-dimensional. So it's a guy in armor, or it's a guy with a hip holster. It's not at all what you're going for.
And like, there's a lot of just super talented artists in the yaoi community making some of like the coolest and sexiest male characters I've ever seen in my life. But they're like closed. They work for themselves and they work for each other, and it's very hard to like entice these artists to like, hey, do you want to work on a commercial project that has nothing to do with your community? The answer is usually no.
Right.
And we're very, very lucky that Hamlet Machine has been working with us. Like, their work is fantastic. They're the one who did the male pinups that we've seen so far. Mm-hmm. But you know, they're also busy with their fans.
So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You find something that you like, to do something you like, then they may already be doing something. Yeah,
and you gotta wait. You gotta be patient. It reminds me of when I first started, when I was knocking on doors and waiting and being patient. To the point, you know, it's like, just add me to your waiting list if you have one. Like, I'm here, I'm not going away. You know, I really want to work with you on this.
So I like it. I like the style of storytelling we found. My partner is super excited. She's like, you know, I love reading. I love science fiction novels. You know, it's been a huge passion my whole life, and now I'm at a point where I get to be a storyteller. And I never thought that would happen. It's so cool. I was like, yeah, we make up stuff. We tell stories. It's not the same as a novel, but we do. She's just thrilled. And it was very, very endearing and very exciting. Like, when your partner realizes just how cool
their job gets to be. Lucky.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of hard work and some sacrifices from basically 25 to 30. There's no social life. I remember, oh my God, I remember like maybe a Sunday a month we'd take a break and just like watch TV on the couch, and it would feel like a vacation on a tropical island, like, just doing nothing, this is the best.
Yeah, I feel that.
We were working like 18 to 20 hour days every day to get through it.
Yeah, because you had to start all that from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah, how much do you each contribute? Just kind of bounce off each other?
So in the beginning, Anna was actually the person who penned the initial rules based on what I wanted and how we're playing. She was like, I think I have a pretty good way to write this down and teach people how to play, right? And the tutorial in the book is actually basically based on her initial, I'm going to explain this to you like a human how to play, and I'm going to sort of stack this in a way that will be easy to learn. And a lot of people, at least I haven't heard it anymore because now everyone knows how to play, that initial like tutorial was one of the best they've ever gone through. But even that was a lot of work. And then, we all had to play so many different roles. Like once Anna had it, and I was looking at it, and I was like, okay, let me switch my brain over to technical gaming. I was like, this is filled with holes. This is a mess, we can't publish this. And then we had a huge fight over it. And I was like, listen, you have to trust me on this. Like, this is great to learn from, but it's not technical enough to stand up to all the rules lawyering that this game is going to have. And she's like, whatever, people will just figure it out. I look at D&D games, like those rules are a goddamn mess. I'm like, yeah, but we're not that. Like, we can be better than this. She's like, you're right, we can be better than this. And so we started to strive towards having a game that had as much human language as possible, but was still technically sound. So first the rules get made up, and like we know how to play, we've invented it, cool. Then we would do a human language pass so that we could get it to a point where it's on paper and it's learnable. Then technical pass, where it's like, all right, let's go back through this and make sure that everything technically aligns and there's no loopholes or things that don't make any sense or could be picked apart and leave gaping gameplay flaws. Then I would go through and do a final gameplay and flavor pass, just to make sure that the way we're talking about things is the right way. Monsters all became it's and theys. And then in the beginning, we decided instead of going with a gendered pronoun, we just go with they. So it's the survivors, they, you, instead of being like he or she. And it kind of like, those small choices added to the way the game communicates to you, which helps you sort of like involve yourself in the lore a bit more, because the way it talks to you is very specific, even when it's covering rules. That's why, like, we get approached by people who want to translate the game into different languages all the time, and like, I would love to. And setting aside even the issue of another production run, which is very expensive, into a new market, it's just like, I hesitate and doubt that they would understand the nuance of the language that goes into it. Like, you can't just Google Translate this.
No, not
There's
at all.
no way. So, like, I'm waiting until a team approaches me that I feel is vetted enough to even begin exploring that idea. And that, too, is also on the back burner as far as what's going on.
Right, because you need somebody that is fluent in, say German.
Yeah.
So a group of German people that, sorry, I was going to say men for some reason, like, yeah, exactly. So a group of Germans that love the game on the English side, and so can directly interpret and figure out the nuances on their language to where it would, all the concepts would convey properly to somebody who doesn't necessarily know English. Yeah. And that's hard.
There's also on the other side of it, which is just kind of like gaming language and the way that we as gamers interpret certain words, right? Like the word epic at this point is overused. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. No, thank you. It's everywhere, right? So that's like sort of became a word that just like, okay, we're not going to use this word because it has a certain connotation. It's no longer like, an epic as a classical epic is. It now feels like epic loot, woo! So it has that tone to someone where it's sort of like cheesy and corny, but in a cool way. And like, unless there was a monster or a gameplay note that we wanted to hit that had that, you know, say for example the cosplay night. Cosplay night might have the epic Twilight sword, right? Because then that makes sense, right? There's that context there based on how we as gamers interpret human language and based on everyone else's work. That's like another layer to the whole cacophony of stuff.
Now the lore. So you got different concepts to the game. You got the gameplay mechanics that you just talked about.
Yep.
You have all the stylized stuff, the art, the sculpts, and then you have all the background stuff.
Yep.
What do you just figure out a concept, then figure out the lore? Does it go vice versa, depending on what comes in your mind?
So I am presentation obsessed. People call me a perfectionist. I never thought or considered that I was. I work on something until I want to throw up, and then I move on to the next thing. But anything that anyone sees or interacts with ends up funneling through me at some point. And usually I'm the start and then the end point for it. So, like, the whole thing is about the experience that someone will have while they're playing. So I start to imagine, like, what is it going to be like when I sit down to play this? What's it going to be like when I turn to this page and I see this, like, showdown? You know, how will the rules be laid out? What sort of, like, you know, active descriptor do I want to set the tone for when you're reading the rules? Like, what kind of image should that be? And then that sort of, like, trickles down to gameplay and then finally the little lore nuggets that we leave. So I think I lost track of the question.
No, you're good. I can pick up. A good example is the showdown boards that you have this year. They're very different from last year.
Yes.
The mechanics, like I was watching yesterday, the Black Knight just threw a survivor through like 4 walls.
Yep.
And then the Screaming Antelopes have those extra the Screaming God is the extra Screaming Antelope pieces that come onto the board.
Yep.
How do you figure that out in terms of gameplay?
So the Black Knight will have board versions of the, you know, the cool 3D terrain that we printed in-house for the show. And we wanted to have it, like, you fight him in a different area. And I think one of the most underexplored design elements in the game so far is not who you're fighting or what you're fighting with, it's where you're fighting. So we wanted to, so that's a very kind of unexplored part of the design space so far. So we focused on that a lot more, especially with those 2 fights. With the Black Knight, you're fighting on this cliffside sanctuary, right? So we were like, well, it needs a new board. You know, we have to think about how to make this fun, how to make it worthwhile for players who are going to now, instead of taking their showdown board out, set up this new experience. So that became, you know, where they fight became a core of how they operate and how they fight. It's like it's their domain, you know, not just I'm going to function the same way as all the monsters that you know before. So the Black Knight will spike you through these ruins. You'll hit these statues that the squires who live, you know, in the sewer system below the Black Knight fix and restore with this like elastomer rubber material. So when you hit a statue, the statue will, you know, unnaturally bend, breaking apart again, you know, and then reform, sending the survivor flying through some even more walls and maybe even off the side of the showdown board, which is the edge of the cliff. It's very different.
Yeah.
So if the monster is used to fighting opponents this way, like, how will it function and how will it behave and interact with the board to try to kill the things that are trying to kill it?
Yeah, that's way more thematic than just the traditional showdown board, because the monsters don't always come to you.
Yeah.
You've got the environment that you've got to figure out and get prepped for a fight. The squires especially are a nice aspect of that. Yeah. We've seen the sculpts for all of them now.
They're all painted up in the front.
I know, I saw that. The storytelling of that, it's hard. The initial showdown versus the lion is great, like you said, to get people into the game as a nice tutorial. But somebody who didn't
Lion's still one of my favorite fights.
Yeah, it is. It's nice when, especially when you get all the resource cards and you just get the lion's balls. That's always funny.
I mean, it's good because it's like it has almost everything the game has to offer right there. The game shows you that you can learn this. It's like, just don't stand in front of it when you attack. That's, you know, if you're doing that, you're already like taking a great step towards winning, right? And then it also has a few like humor notes in it, so that it's, even though it's like dark and gritty and stuff, there's just that little bit of juvenile.
Well, it's you're very inspired by anime, and there's always that little cheeky hint of this isn't quite normal, but we're gonna run with it because it's anime.
I mean, it's just my humor.
Yeah, exactly.
We couldn't completely neglect that.
Yeah, the for a lot of people getting into the game, right after that encounter, they're thrown in the deep end.
Yeah.
Are you gonna ever do something like with the Black Knight and Squires, maybe a smaller, like tight-knit campaign that has a distinct end, and then they can go into?
I don't know.
Like it'd be interesting.
Set?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Like for one of those expansions, just to include an extra book. Hey, you can include this in your regular campaign, or
initially,
you can play
as a start. One of the things I wanted to do initially that we ended up cutting from everything was for every expansion monster, I wanted to have a page which was just like, hey, if you just want to fight this monster, here's some pre-made survivors, here's the gear they have, here's how you set up, go. Just so you could like be like, let's just jump in and play. But I don't think like 99% of the players who play Kingdom Death have really much interest in that at all. Like they're not really interested in the puzzle that we create for them there. They want to play the campaign.
Right.
They want to know about what happens to their settlement. So when we were like getting close to print and like the deadlines were alive, both Anna and the other designer we had at that point, Zach Maroney, were like, I don't think we need this, Adam. Like, we really don't need to add 4 pages to each book to have this thing that almost everyone's going to ignore. And I was like, all right.
Yeah, because then that adds an extra
They're like,
production.
listen, if you really want to do this, we'll just put it online.
Yep.
I was like, okay.
That's the way to do it.
Let's put it online.
You guys put so much work into the demos you do here. That's like a perfect thing to do for people who just want to just have a good time playing. Maybe make them a little longer, but other than that.
But as far as the starter set goes, I don't think we ever will make something that's a smaller version of the core game. I remember when we were talking about it, and I had one of the guys who was working with us at the time make it. And he was like, I had to pull like almost everything out of this. It's like, you can't have disorders, you can't have fighting arts, no innovations. It's like, so really, there's all these like hooks in the game that give you these things randomly. So what do you want me to do about the hunt event table? Like, if I boiled it down to things that don't give you any of this stuff, like we're looking at only a few events. I was like, that's interesting. I didn't realize just how quite interconnected everything was. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's not do this. But that's why the sprue has the 4 survivors, the lion, and the butcher on it. Did that on purpose so that we could maybe make a starter set with just one sprue.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But then, you know, it was such a neutered version of the experience. I was like, I don't really see a point. You know?
Yeah, because then you're just dumbing down the awesomeness that you made and took all that time to make.
Yeah.
And you're stripping away parts of it.
A lot of it. You have to strip away so much that the experience then becomes almost completely different.
So could you go a different route and make like a standalone game that's completely different mechanics-wise? Because you were talking about dungeon crawlers.
Yeah.
You could do it. I know, you're good.
I've got a dry spot.
It's a lot of talking. It's all good. A lot of
a lot of the game universe I want to explore, and my excuse for exploring it and sort of revealing more about the world as a whole to you guys are expansions and, you know, new games within it.
It's little pieces that we get here and there that fill in the gaps in the lore.
At this point, I've figured out a lot about what's going on, and when I have the opportunity, I'm pretty excited to start to get into it. But I need to get through this Kickstarter.
So, right, because we were talking last year, because there are monsters that you said would be too difficult.
Yes.
So like the scribe would be one of those. The king, right? That wouldn't really fit into the overall campaign the way it is now.
Yeah.
Would you do a different class of character? Maybe Twilight Knight?
Maybe.
Actually going through, and because a lot of people, I love the aspect that, hey, you're fighting for your life, your survivors are not strong. You want to get them there, but they're probably not going to get there. A lot of people they want to make the ultimate character. They want somebody that's strong and can take hits better than normal and has a chance against these monsters.
That's a different game and a different experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I'm getting at is potentially seeing you do that in the future.
I hope to get there.
Yeah. There's so much of the production you got to get through.
Yeah.
We're only on wave 3 now, so another 5 years maybe.
I have no idea.
Realistically,
it's hard to say. I got a little bit of work done on what is currently called Labyrinth, the hero game, but for it to stand up to Monster, it needs a lot of work.
It does, yeah.
A lot of thought. And Monster ended up being my sort of creative answers to a lot of the shortcomings and flaws that a lot of my favorite games have. So I'm very like critical designer. I take what I love, figure out what I don't like about it, and then try to polish those edges so that the experience can be better without those little pieces. So, going back to Labyrinth, which essentially probably should be some form of dungeon crawl, how do I reapproach that in a way where it feels as good as this game does?
Right, it's got a lot to live up to, so you just have to take the time to figure all that out.
Where in this game was my solution to some of the shortcomings of those games.
Right, and you don't want it to be directly, people are going to directly compare the two.
Of course.
And so you don't want it to be exactly like KDM mechanics-wise.
There is another thought that I've been pursuing that I'm still sort of tooling with is maybe we can use the same system. Maybe, we can just continue increasing the stats to a point where it makes sense. Which, if we can pull it off, would be extremely satisfying to play. Because you're like, oh yeah, just 4 white lines. Here they are. There's a guy who can handle them. Here are his stats.
Yeah, that'd actually be really cool.
Although the 4 decks at the same time wouldn't work.
No. So you'd have to tweak all that. But it's good to know that a lot of the monsters we haven't seen, that we may eventually get to see them.
Especially the ones that have resin versions, like the Forge God.
Yeah.
That's a super cool one. Infant Sunstalker is another awesome one.
Yeah. Which brings me back to, I remember way back in the day, you mentioned doing like a 2D platformer kind of game.
Yep.
Another back burner project, I assume?
That has actually still been being worked on very slowly.
Nice.
I get about 2 hours a week in on it, and we have 2 of the guys who are working on it actually here on the floor. They've been instructed to tell everyone nothing.
Okay.
But it's again like a love letter to some of my favorite games, which are cinematic platformers, original Prince of Persia, Out of This World, Flashback. And you just don't see games like that. Even that era was very small, but so many games drew inspiration from it. Like Tomb Raider was just a 3D send-up of Prince of Persia.
Yep.
And then Assassin's Creed was an extension and a send-up of Tomb Raider. So like that, like the DNA is there. And it's been interesting sort of like going back to it. Like I really want it to be a game where you think about what you're going to do and then attempt to do it, as opposed to a lot of modern Steam games, which I love, which are all twitch and reflex based. Like, you just sort of dive in and like you have such precise control over the character that it doesn't really matter. You're just responding.
Right, because the bosses are so hard. What is it? Hyperlight Drifter is a good one. Like the bosses are great, but it is very twitchy. If you mess up, you're gonna die.
I'm a big fan of that game too.
It's really good. I didn't notice from the figure in the Kickstarter.
Yeah,
didn't notice that at all.
I think I was wearing one of the T-shirts last year too.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I think that about covers it. There isn't too much. Anything you want to ask?
There's a few questions that were left on your phone, but I mean there was some about the Lantern Festival, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's nothing too crazy. I don't want to
tie into what we've talked about.
Yeah, I don't want it to go over. We've been here for I think like 45.
Is there anything that you want to touch on? Anything cool that?
I mean, I am eternally grateful to you, Justin, and the fans who've continued to support us. Like, at the beginning of this, and I hope still, I was just like a normal person who wanted to make a thing, and the fact that so many people responded to that and were interested in it and wanted to play it and supported it and have continued to support it is like mind-blowing. I'm not like groomed from this. I didn't come from money. I'm not the son of a powerful CEO or anything like that. It certainly seems convenient. So there's been a lot of like learning and growing into the role of the person that needs to be able to handle all this to continue to facilitate this grand vision, so to speak. And it's been like, I don't know, like coming to Gencon is a great recharge point for myself and the team, because we get to like see everybody. They come and they're like, still love your game, still our favorite game. Like, thanks so much for making it. And I get to go, okay, the hard work is worth it, and I just can't thank everyone enough, especially the patience. Understanding that good things do take time, and showing us that everyone is willing to sort of, wait for these things is very endearing. It's certainly better than what the opposite of that might be like. Like, we got the game out, it overwhelmed everyone, and that bought us a lot of goodwill, right? So I just want to thank everyone for giving us that goodwill.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Adam, a lot. And it's always good to see you here.
I feel like I have to continue to level up and continue to train the team and myself to meet everyone's, rising expectations of what we're capable of.
Well, that's all a little bit your fault because you keep pushing yourself too.
I know, it's interesting. Who's pushing who, right?
I know.
Am I pushing the expectations, or are you guys pushing me? I don't know.
I think they feed off each other.
Yeah.
You have this vision in your head. You want to get there. You get there, and then people are very appreciative. But then you think of something else, and then it just spirals out of control.
A little bit. A little.
But it's not a good place to be.
I think it's not a bad place to be.
Yeah. No, and you said before, I believe it was in a post or you told me directly that you were working a regular job and you hated it, and now you wake up every day and you love what you do.
Yes.
And that means everything.
Although there are some days where I absolutely hate myself, but I think that's just how life is.
Yeah. Sometimes you get overwhelmed. Sometimes.
Yeah. As the business grows and the fans grow, it's like you're pushed to deal with things you never thought you'd have to deal with before. Like Tuesday was a great example of that. We got here, we're sitting in the booth. It's raining like crazy. The guys left all the hand trucks at the facility. So I was like, all right, next year we got to make sure that the hand trucks go onto the truck before we bring it over for sure. Let's make sure that they're at the front of the storage so they come out and then go onto the truck. So we had to unload everything by hand in the rain. I bought some ponchos, we got through it, no big deal, everyone had a good time. And then I went to the warehouse to pick up the cord games, which we forgot, no big deal. It's right by here. And I get in, and there's an 8-foot cube crate that looks like a velociraptor's inside. And they're like, yeah, this is the statue that you got. I'm like, standing in front of this thing like, oh my God, there's no way this is gonna fit on the van. Like, how much does this weigh? 700 pounds? Okay. So, the company said that they were going to send it to me in man-sized crates, and we would build it like a big miniature. Okay, and there's going to be a video showing us how to do it. I'm like, all right, I'll have the sculpt team probably handle that. But instead, it was only in 3 parts. So I had to emergency get a freight truck driver to bring it over, and then we had to pay George Fern a little bit of a fee to drive it 60 feet for us, and we set it up. But that moment where open the box, and there it was just spectacular. I never thought we would be commissioning a huge statue like that, and here we are doing it.
Yeah, and the booth gets bigger every year, and you certainly got a huge fan reaction from that thing.
Yeah, it's super cool. I want to do more for sure. And now I'll know what to expect. That's what happens. You overextend yourself and you try something new, and then you're met with, maybe not exactly what you expect or even what they said they'd deliver. It's like, what?
But that's life.
Yeah, it's fun. But at that moment, you're kind of like, all right, well, gotta deal with this now.
Well, like you said, you work best when you're just winging it.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate talking to you as always, and good seeing you. And hopefully be here next year.
Yeah. Good to see you, Justin.
Awesome.